Welcome to Mindflow. Mindflow is a SaaS no-code platform that specializes in orchestration and automation of flows. Today, operations tend to have browsers with several tabs open to various systems, and they deal with copy-paste in order to transfer data from one point to another. That's not really efficient. So the market came up with SOARs. The problem with actual SOARs is that actually the simple tasks that need to be automated need to have its own SOAR expert. It's not what we want to do at Mindflow. At Mindflow, what we want to bring is to bring simplicity and make sure that actually we build an orchestrator that everybody can use. We focus on user experience by providing modern and simple collaborative tool that helps your teams to build workflows using no code. We have several and seamless native integrations that can target your own infrastructure. And finally, various templates that can be adapted to your ecosystem also can be used with GenAI in order to help you out. This is our workspace view. The different workspaces are listed here on the left and can be either assigned to a team, for example, SecOps team or CloudOps team, or they can encapsulate different workflows that are within the same theme, for example, threat intelligence here above. On the right, we have the different automations and workflows that have been built by the security team, for example. Here, there is an example of the analysis of an IP that would be done through different systems, determine its harmlessness before generating a report, and then send that report via Slack. A more cloud-oriented workflow here can be the cleanup of inactive users within your own AWS organization. Again, here we're using various integrations in order to do notifications, create tickets, or delete the user if needed. All those steps here are based on what we call integrations. Let's jump into it. This is our integrations view. By integrations, we mean the different services that actually the vendors are providing. As you can see here, we have quite a nice list of vendors. And for example, for AWS, we have all the services that AWS propose. Each of them will be an integration. An integration to us is not a connector only. A connector that is linked to some kind of custom development or a connector that needs to be maintained is quite hard to scale. Which means that on our side, what we do is that we integrate the APIs of the services directly, which means that if there is a new version of an API or a new tool that is coming on the market, we will be able to onboard it quite fast. And we currently onboard quite big players like AWS, for example, like Google. If we want to have a management, workspace management, Google Workspace Management, we also have Microsoft. If we would like to have a Azure environment and cloud to orchestrate. We have also the Atlassian suite that is providing Jira, Confluence, and Bitbucket, for example. So how now do we build our workflows? To do so, we enable the different APIs, and from there they will be available to us. Getting back to our first example, we see that actually we're using 4 different services: VirusTotal, IPinfo, URL Scan, and Slack. Each step of the workflow is actually a operation of one specific service. How to add that specific service in our workflow? Actually, we double click on the board and we see that actually we are able to add a lot of things to in our workflow. The integrations are here on the bottom, but we're not only integrations, since actually we will be able to add also conditional and somehow logic building. For the services themselves, when actually we choose to use one service, we actually, as mentioned previously, are able to use all the operations of that specific API. Here for VirusTotal, we would be able to either analyze a URL or actually request a IP scan. For URL scan, for example, we would be able to also request an IP scan and get the result after that. For each step, we would be able to find not only the input, but also some documentation. For example, here we have the information of the service itself, plus some information of the operation that actually we were actually using. In this panel, you will also find other configurations that are actually required, such as the settings with where actually we would be setting up the credentials. This is the only prerequisite we have for one API to be called and for service to be consumed. In this more advanced workflow, what we do is that actually we are detecting a suspicious login attempt. What does it mean? That we're trying to figure out if there is an impossible travel case that is happening here. We have some alert that is coming from the CM, alerting us of some kind of logging from a specific user. What we do is that we would try to identify if the user is allowed to log in from that location specifically. So what we do is that we retrieve the details from that specific user, identify if the user has already been suspended or not. If it has not been suspending, what we do is that actually we're going to scan using VirusTotal as previously, getting the reputation of the IP where it's connecting from. And if it's not a risky IP, then everything is okay. But if it's a risky IP, what we do is that actually we'll make sure that actually the location the user who is connecting from is exactly the same his device is connecting from also. So what we get is that we will use an EDR. Here in this example, it will be Harfang Lab in order to get the details from the device and then compare the two locations of the IPs, the user location and the device location. If they are actually the same location, then it will be a good thing. If it's not the same, we will actually be raising alerts. In this case, if it's not the good location, what we can do is that actually we also can block all the traffic coming from that specific IP. For example, here we will add another step to our workflow as showed previously. And in this time, we will be using AWS WAF v2. As you can see first, there is all the list of the the different operations, that actually are available for AWS. And based on this one, we will be able to update the list of the IPs that needs to be blacklisted. So I search for updates and I can see here that we are able to update the specified list IP sets. By clicking here on the step, I'm adding another step to my workflow, which means that actually I will be able to configure it properly by adding the different addresses, for example, from where it's coming from. Again, the information of the API is in the info login that is describing what is the service doing, plus what actually this specific API or step is doing. This documentation is not coming from Mindflow at all. It's coming from the vendor. This is one of also the strength of integrating APIs, that we benefit from the vendor documentation, not only for the specific API that we have here, but also for each input data that is actually requested. Here we are asked to fulfill the name of the IP sets, the different scope, the ID, and the different addresses in order to block the IP itself. By default, the form is reduced to the only required fields, but there is an advanced mode here where actually I would be able to show all the needed fields, such as description here, that would be part of the request. This one is the only one for this operation, but we can have several ones for the others. You might have seen in this playbook or this workflow that actually there are not only just a linear addition of different steps, but there is also some kind of conditions. We are able to manage different conditioning here based on the different inputs. We have the different branches that are listed here, and by configuring the different branches, we will be able to check if the truth for this branch can be executed or not. And based on this, we will be able to build a conditional workflow as this one, where actually we have different branches with different, let's say, scenarios that can be executed. It's not only algorithmic steps that we can add, but we can add also different loops. We can add a note. We can actually transform data in order actually to define variables or add something to the flow. For example, here we are simulating the alert that is coming from the CM by defining a Google Alert variable for this one. Let's dig in workflow execution. In this workflow, we'll simulate an alert that is coming from Azure Sentinel in order to be able to react to it. So once actually the alert is coming, we'll create a Jira ticket, send a message to the manager in order to assign the ticket to someone, update the ticket, and then give the feedback to the manager. Here we will be able to choose in which channel, Slack channel, we'll be able to communicate to the manager. And for that, we have already predefined variable for that. And I can choose or pick the variable by pushing / button. we'll choose this Slack button here, Slack channel here. Same for this one. And now to execute the playbook, we'd have several ways to do it. The first one is the play button. Doing so, we would be able to run the playbook and see execution. Once it has been executed, we would be able to check if the Jira ticket has been created. Here in the list, we have no ticket in our environment, and we would be able to see that the ticket has been created. Yet, the ticket has not been assigned to anybody. In this step here, we're waiting for the manager approval. That's why actually we have an asynchronous playbook symbolized with those three let's say the dotted arrow that is here. In our laboratory, we have a message that is coming here, and for which we'll be able to choose to whom assign the ticket. When we choose the person to assign the ticket to, we would be able to see the completion of the playbook. We can see that in the laboratory we have a summary for the ticket itself, but also in Jira we can imagine or figure out that actually the ticket has been updated. And we see that the ticket has been updated in this point. The other ways to execute the playbook would be either to schedule a task to do so. Here I would say it's a little bit pointless to do it, but it's something that we would be able to do for other tasks, for example. Another way to execute it is to call or trigger the playbook via webhook. We have two different webhooks, asynchronous webhooks and synchronous webhooks, that are actually used by Slack in order to trigger the playbook when it is needed. In this case, we actually are linking the different buttons that we have seen earlier to the webhook, so actually we would be able to again catch the call and figure out which user it will be assigned the ticket to. Another way to demonstrate the webhook's usage for triggering the playbooks is to use directly Slack as a trigger. In this case, we would be able to trigger the analyze IP that we have seen earlier as a playbook in order to request Mindflow to do the analysis itself. We see that with webhooks is triggering the playbook and the execution is going through. At the end, as mentioned earlier, we have a summary that is coming back to Slack. And the summary is the following: the IP that we would have, the summary of virus total, URL scan, and IP info as the playbook is mentioning it. We visually witness the correct execution of the playbook, but it's also something we can check in the logs at playbook level. We can see that all the executions of the playbooks have been successful, and here we can even know how it has been triggered. We also have the time and when it has been triggered and its execution duration. It's not the only thing that we can actually check in the logs, but we can actually inspect every step itself. By inspecting the data themselves, we will be able to see the execution code, the HTTP execution code of the request, but also the data that actually the API is getting back to us. This is how actually we would be able to figure out what is the data that we put into the report at the end. This one can be either for a virus total, but also for any step that we have. To monitor playbook execution, the logs are just perfect for that. The analytics module gets it to another level, to a platform level. It summarizes the different execution of the different playbooks based on the status, but also on their trigger. We have the number of playbooks that are available plus the total run count. The other part of the analytics module gets actually information about the timing, putting the data into a time frame, but also different information that are related about the distributions. The details run here will get one execution at the time, gets the status plus the duration of the execution. A perfect module to have an overview of the different execution that happens from start date to an end date. And if needed, we can even filter by playbook. Let's talk about RBAC, or role-based access control. It allows every user to define the access policy to its own workspace. The new users that are actually added in this workspace will be able to either have different roles in order to be different type of contributors to this workspace. An owner will have full access control on the workspace, the different playbooks, but also the different credentials related to that playbook, which means that within the same playbook, they would be able to create new playbooks that would be actually relying on the same credentials. Speaking of credentials, they're all defined and stored in the vault. The vault stores the credentials in an encrypted way into the database, relying on a KMS key. I have access to all the credentials that are either scoped to be all workspaces, or they are actually linked to a workspace that I'm actually a member of. When I own the workspace or have enough privileges, I would be able to edit that specific credential. I will not be able to have the value, but I would be able to change its type if needed or redefine the credential as it suits me. This is because I'm actually logged in as a normal user. By assuming the role of administrator of the platform, you can imagine that I would have full control of it. And one of the privileges of the admin is to be able to edit all the credentials, whether or not they are linked to its own workspace. And as you can imagine also, for the playbooks, we have access to all the workspaces that are defined in the system, with also access to all the playbooks they actually have. One of the cool features that we have at Mindflow is the ability to create workspaces and playbooks using GenAI. We are able actually to generate some prompts that will be specifically tailored to security in order to generate workflows that are related with the theme. Let's create here a DevSecOps workspace with fully generated workspaces. We see now that actually the workspace is starting to be filled with the generated playbooks. Let's give it a time and then we see what we got. We already have some flow that have been finished. Let's check one of them. Once generated, we would see different things in the playbook. We have an AI note that actually is able to tell which prompt it has been used and what is the description of the playbook. And we have the executable workflow that will be here. We can figure out some other one to see how it goes. We have also a few templates on our website. Some use cases that we already have drafted here in the list, and we can see how it can be implemented as an example. This is something that you can get inspired from, and you can also use them as templates. On the website, you have the description of the workflow, but also the full detailed idea on how it can be used. Additionally to this, there is a Play Store on our website where actually you can try to any prompt into a ready-to-go flow. We can select any prompt from here, and a few seconds later, it will be generated in this box. There it goes. From an empty playbook, there is a way to leverage AI again. From this prompt, we would be able here to either select one of the suggestions or either type our own prompt. Here is an example of a prompt that is actually asking for an automated process to extract and analyze the logs. Let's imagine. As a result, we have something very similar to previously. We have an AI note that is describing what will be the prompt, there is a description of the workflow, plus exactly the workflow that we actually have been requested, or at least it's one proposal. We're getting to the end of this video, so thank you for watching. We hope it helped you understand what Mindflow is and what we do. We're looking forward to onboard you and have you with us.